During the first week of my retirement, my son told me, "We don't need another mouth to feed in this house," and found me a job as a janitor. I smiled and accepted, hiding my cold anger behind a mask of resignation. But when I didn't show up for work, he realized something. He had underestimated me, and now his life would never be the same. Today was my last day of work. Finally retired. The fork slipped from Matthew's hand, clattering against his plate. His wife Valerie's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. I beamed at them both, expecting congratulations, maybe even a toast with the cheap wine we kept for special occasions. Instead, silence stretched over our small kitchen table like a canyon. Matt recovered first, his face flushing. "What? Dad, you can't just quit your job like that? Did you even think about what this means?" "Of course I did," I said, my smile faltering. 40 years of service, son. I've earned it. I thought we could celebrate." "Celebrate?" Valerie's voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife. She set her water glass down with deliberate force. "Matthew, does your father think we're just going to feed him for free?" The warmth in my chest began to freeze. This wasn't how I'd pictured this moment on the drive home. I'd imagined smiles, maybe Matt clapping me on the back, telling me how proud he was of his old man. Instead, my son's face twisted into something I'd never seen directed at me. Pure annoyance. "Listen, Dad," Matt leaned forward, his manager's tone replacing any trace of family affection. "I'm not supporting an extra mouth. You need a job, tomorrow. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or stocking shelves, but you're not going to sit here living off my paycheck." Each word hit me like a physical blow. I looked at this man I had raised, whose college education I had financed, whose wedding I had helped pay for. The overhead light cast harsh shadows on his features, making him look like a stranger. Valerie nodded in approval. "Arthur, you're 65, not 90. Plenty of people your age work. My neighbor's father bags groceries, and he's 73. "But I thought," I began. "You thought wrong," Matt interrupted. "You think money grows on trees? Do you have any idea what it costs to run this house, to keep you fed and clothed? I work 50 hours a week at Vanguard Industries just to keep us afloat." The irony was lost on him, though neither of them would understand it. Not yet. My untouched dinner grew cold as I absorbed their words. The casserole Valerie had made, my favorite, now looked unappetizing under the fluorescent light. Everything about this moment felt wrong, distorted, like seeing my life in a funhouse mirror. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "I should have discussed it with you first. May." Matt's expression softened slightly, perhaps hearing the defeat in my tone. "Look, Dad, I'm not trying to be cruel, but reality is reality. We can't afford a freeloader." That word buzzed in my head as I nodded, playing the part of the chastised father. I said I would think about their words. Good. Valerie picked up the plates with brisk efficiency. The sooner, the better. They disappeared into the living room, leaving me alone at the kitchen table. I could hear the TV spring to life, their voices returning to normal conversational tones as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just shattered 40 years of dreams in 10 minutes. I sat there, staring at the empty chairs where my family had been moments before. The house settled around me with creaks and sighs, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, normal sounds on a normal night that felt anything but. Slowly, I stood up and began clearing the remaining dishes, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind processed what had just happened. They saw me as a burden. After everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, they saw their father as nothing more than an unwanted expense. I turned off the kitchen light and headed to my small room at the back of the house, leaving Matt and Valerie to their evening entertainment. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, but tonight I needed to think. I lay fully dressed on my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling where the shadows of passing cars painted moving patterns. The house had settled into the stillness of the night, but my mind was reeling from the dinner conversation. 40 years of faithful service, and this was my reward, to be called a freeloader by my own son. The room was small, furnished with only the basics, a twin bed, a nightstand, and a dresser that had seen better decades. Family photos adorned the top of the dresser. Matt's graduation, his wedding, holidays where we all looked happy. Had it all been an illusion? Voices filtered through the thin wall separating my room from the master bedroom. Murmurs at first, but they gradually grew louder as Matt and Valerie settled into their nightly routine. "I can't believe he just announced it like that," Matt was saying. His voice carried clearly through the drywall. I turned towards the wall, suddenly alert. They were talking about me. "He really thinks he can just sit at home, living off my money." Matt's voice rose, apparently unconcerned about being overheard. 40 years of work. So what? That doesn't give him the right to retire on my salary. Valerie's response came, muffled but distinct. "What if he refuses to work? What if he just sits around watching TV all day? Then we'll take his pension and stick him in a nursing home. Enough is enough. I'm tired of carrying dead weight." The words hit me like ice water. Nursing home, dead weight. I gripped the sheet, my knuckles white in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "He's been living off us for 2 years, ever since Mom died," Valerie continued. "Free meals, and now he doesn't even want to work. He's got some nerve." Poverty. I closed my eyes, remembering the checks I had written. $23,000 for Matt's state university education, $8,000 for his wedding. They didn't even mention they were living in my house. "The old man doesn't realize how expensive everything is now," Matt said. "Utilities, groceries, insurance. He thinks it's still 1995. "Maybe we should give him a deadline," Valerie suggested. 1 week to find a job, or he's out." "Perfect. And if he complains, we'll remind him that beggars can't be choosers." Their laughter filtered through the wall, casual and cruel. I lay there, absorbing every word, every dismissive chuckle, every casual reference to my uselessness. These were the people I had sacrificed for, the family I had loved unconditionally. The house fell quiet again as they settled in to sleep. I remained motionless, processing this new reality. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose fears I had calmed, saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient expense. A nursing home. The phrase repeated in my mind like a drumbeat. They had already planned my exile. They had already decided my fate, take my pension, the modest monthly check that represented 4 decades of labor, and warehouse me with other discarded parents. I thought of my colleagues who had received gold watches and retirement parties. Jim Morales got a fishing boat from his kids. Ellen's family threw her a surprise celebration at the local community center. I got threats and dinner table ultimatums. But as I lay there in the dark, something else began to stir beneath the hurt and the shock. A cold, calculating anger that surprised me with its intensity. They wanted to play games with their father's future. They wanted to treat Arthur like a helpless, senile old man. Maybe it was time they learned exactly who Arthur really was. I closed my eyes and began to plan. Sleep didn't come. I lay still in the darkness, listening as the house grew silent around me. As all the sacrifices replayed in my head, the silence now felt different. Not peaceful, but heavy with an unspoken truth. For 40 years, I worked hard, saving every penny I could for Matthew's future. Double shifts at the plant when he needed books for school. Weekend jobs when his college tuition bills arrived. All those years eating canned soup while my paycheck went to his education at the state university. I remembered the night he called home, panicked about a tuition hike. "Don't you worry, son," I'd told him, already calculating how many overtime hours I'd need to work. "Your old man will figure it out." And I did, trading sleep for his dreams, my comfort for his opportunities. His wedding day flashed in my memory. Valerie in her white dress, Matt beaming in his rented tux, both of them blissfully unaware that their budget wedding had quietly doubled in cost. I'd covered the difference without a word, watching them dance to the music I'd paid for, eating the cake I'd financed, celebrating the love I'd made possible. All that time, I had lived modestly, not out of poverty, but by choice, letting them think I struggled from paycheck to paycheck while my real investments grew silently in accounts they never knew existed. Better to be seen as generous than as rich, or so I had believed. My fingers traced the worn bedspread, and I thought of Lawrence Vargas. 25 years ago, when his small manufacturing startup was just a fledgling dream, I had believed in his vision. $500,000 in seed money, disguised as a loan to avoid complications. We had shaken hands in his garage, 2 men betting on the future. Vanguard Industries now employed 3,000 people across the country, Matt worked for a company his father had helped build, never knowing that his paychecks were funded, in part, by the man he now called dead weight. All right, Matthew, this is a game two can play. The photo on my nightstand caught a sliver of light from the street. Matt, at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding the baseball glove I'd saved for 2 months to buy. That boy had grown into a man who would steal his father's pension and abandon him to strangers. But he had made a crucial mistake. He saw a weakness where there was only kindness, mistook generosity for desperation. He assumed his father's modest lifestyle meant his father was powerless. Tomorrow, I would surprise them all by agreeing to work. I would let them think they had won, let them feel superior, while I positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes, the best revenge requires patience, and I had spent 65 years learning how to wait for the right moment. The clock read 1:23 a.m. In 6 hours, I would begin teaching my son the difference between charity and vulnerability. He wanted to see his father humbled. He would get his wish, right up until the moment he realized who truly held all the cards. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and finally allowed myself to sleep. The morning would bring new possibilities, and I intended to be well rested for what was coming. The morning coffee was already brewing when I walked into the kitchen. Matt stood by the counter in his weekend clothes while Valerie buttered toast at the table. They both looked up as I appeared, their expressions a mix of curiosity and the leftover hostility from last night's conversation. "Matthew, I've been thinking about your words," I said, sitting down in my usual chair. "You're right." Matt's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. Valerie's knife stopped mid-swipe, leaving a smear of butter suspended on her toast. They were clearly expecting another argument, more pleading about my retirement dreams. "Seriously?" Matt set his mug down with obvious suspicion. "You're not going to fight us on this?" What would be the point? A man my age should contribute to the household. I see that now. I kept my voice steady, reasonable. Valerie exchanged a look with her husband, likely wondering if this was some kind of trick. They had braced for a battle and found surrender instead. Matt leaned against the counter, his manager persona emerging. "Well, since you're being practical about this, I might have a solution. There's a janitor position open at my company." Vanguard Industries. I felt a small smile threaten the corners of my mouth and quickly suppressed it. "That sounds perfect. I'll take it." "Just like that?" Valerie's voice held notes of disbelief and satisfaction. "You're willing to clean offices?" "Honest work is honest work," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "When would I start?" Matt's chest puffed up slightly with newfound authority. "Monday morning, 7 o'clock sharp. You'd be ideal for the position. No complaints. You follow orders, grateful for the opportunity." He paused, savoring his next words. "The pay is minimum wage, of course, but beggars can't be choosers, right?" There it was again, the phrase they had laughed about through the thin walls. I nodded seriously, as if accepting both the job and the insult with equal grace. "I'll have to talk to my boss Larry to get the hiring approved," Matt continued, "but I'm sure he'll understand the family situation. He'll probably feel sorry for you." Larry, my oldest friend, my business partner, the man in whose garage I had sat 25 years ago, discussing dreams and investments. "That's very kind of you to help arrange this," I said, letting just enough gratitude slip into my voice to make them feel magnanimous. Valerie reached across the table and gave my hand a condescending pat. "See? That wasn't so hard. You just needed to face the reality of your situation." My situation. If only she knew. "I thank you both for helping me understand," I said. "It'll be good to have a purpose again, to contribute something meaningful to the family income." Matt nodded in approval. Exactly the attitude we wanted to see. Maybe this will work out after all. He pulled out his phone, presumably to contact Larry about the janitorial spot. I watched him dial, imagining Larry's reaction when he received this particular request. "I'll make the call this afternoon," Matt said. "I'll get everything set for Monday." "Perfect," I replied, already picturing my first day back at Vanguard Industries. It would, in fact, be a homecoming, just not the kind Matt anticipated. The conversation shifted to weekend plans and grocery lists, but I barely heard them. My mind was already planning for Monday morning, calculating exactly how long it would take for the truth to come out. Very soon, they would learn that underestimating Arthur was the most expensive mistake they had ever made. Monday morning arrived, crisp and clear. The week between my agreement and today had passed in a blur of smug preparations on Matt's part. He had proudly informed Larry about his paternal problem solution. He had bought me cleaning supplies and outlined my duties with barely concealed satisfaction. I'd played along perfectly, nodding with appreciation while internally counting down the minutes to this very moment. At 7:30 a.m., I sat in my kitchen, sipping coffee and reading the morning paper. Through the window, I could see the neighbors heading to work, their routines unchanged by the small revolution brewing in my house. The cleaning supplies Matt had bought sat untouched in their bag by the door, a prop in the theater of his expectations. My phone remained silent until 8:15 a.m. Then it exploded. "Dad, where are you?" Matt's voice crackled with fury and panic. "My boss just ripped me a new one. Larry was expecting the new janitor and nobody showed." "Oh dear," I said, affecting just the right tone of confused concern. "What time was I supposed to be there?" 8 o'clock. We discussed this every day this week. How could you forget?" I paused, letting his agitation build before answering with carefully measured bewilderment. "I'm so sorry, Matthew. Age, you know. Sometimes things just slip my mind. These old brains aren't what they used to be." "This isn't about your brain." His voice rose another octave. "I stuck my neck out for you. I told Larry you'd be reliable. That hiring family was a smart move. Now I look like a complete fool." Perfect. I pictured Larry's confusion, likely wondering why Matt was so invested in hiring an elderly janitor. My old friend was polite, but he certainly would have noted the irregularity. "I feel terrible about this misunderstanding," I continued, maintaining my performance of senile confusion. "What did Mr. Vargas say?" "He asked why I was so personally involved in the hiring process. I had to explain that you were my father, that you lived at home, that you needed the work." Matt's voice carried the bitter taste of professional shame. The whole conversation was humiliating. Interesting. Larry hadn't revealed our connection, maintaining his discretion even when presented with this bizarre situation. He was probably trying to figure out why Arthur's son was offering Arthur a menial job at Arthur's own company. "Perhaps I could come in this afternoon," I offered helpfully, "to make up for the lost time." "No, tomorrow you will be at work at 7:45 a.m. sharp, or else." He cut himself off, probably remembering he was talking to his supposedly forgetful father. "Just don't let this happen again, Dad. My reputation is on the line." "Of course, son, I completely understand." After he hung up, I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of deep satisfaction. Phase 1 had worked perfectly. Matt was rattled, embarrassed in front of his boss and questioning his father's reliability. The careful authority he had built around this arrangement was already cracking. Tomorrow would bring Phase 2, and I had several hours to prepare the next surprise, but for now I had achieved exactly what I set out to do. I had reminded Matt that even when he thought he held all the cards, his father could still find ways to upset the game. I folded the paper and headed toward my computer. Phase 3 would require more setup, but the groundwork was already laid. With Matt's angry phone call still echoing in my mind, I moved to the small desk in my room where 2 manila folders waited. I'd been preparing this particular surprise for 2 months, ever since the night I discovered Valerie's secret. It had been a January evening when I noticed letterhead from Gomez and Associates scattered on the kitchen counter. Valerie had been careless, leaving work documents next to her coffee mug while she took a phone call. My trained eye, 40 years of reviewing financial statements, immediately caught the irregularities in the expense reports. Office supplies, $847, $50, equipment maintenance, $1,234, $75. The numbers seemed inflated for a small accounting firm. I had handled budgets for decades. These figures raised immediate red flags. Interesting, I had murmured to myself that day, carefully photographing the documents with my phone while Valerie chatted in the next room. Why does Valerie have work documents at home, and why do these numbers look so strange? That night, I had called my old acquaintance Mike Ramirez, a forensic accountant who owed me several favors from our professional days. "Mike, could you look into something for me at Gomez and Associates?" I had asked casually. Completely confidential, of course. I'm just curious about their actual office supply expenditures over the last 6 months. 3 days later, Mike had discreetly provided me with the actual expense reports. The comparison was damning. Valerie had been systematically inflating costs and pocketing the difference. Office supplies that cost $347 became $847 on her reports. A $534 maintenance bill became $934s, $75. A month of careful theft, hidden behind falsified receipts and altered invoices. Now, sitting at my computer, I opened both files side by side. The evidence was irrefutable. Valerie's falsified documents photographed from our kitchen table, alongside the authentic records Mike had obtained. The pattern was clear, systematic, and utterly criminal. I began to type the anonymous email. Dear Mr. Gomez, I am writing to inform you of serious financial irregularities in your firm's expense reporting. Your employee, Valerie, has been systematically embezzling funds through falsified office supply and maintenance expenses. Attached, you will find documented proof comparing her reported expenditures against actual vendor receipts. The pattern spans several months and represents a substantial theft from your company. I recommend an immediate investigation and audit of all expense reports submitted by her. Sincerely, a concerned party. I attached the scanned evidence files. I double-checked the anonymous email account I had created specifically for this purpose, and I placed my finger over the send button. For a moment, I considered the consequences. Valerie would likely be fired, possibly prosecuted. Matt would be dealing with an unemployed wife under criminal investigation. Their financial stability would crumble. Then I remembered their laughter through the thin walls, their casual planning of my exile to a nursing home, their complete disregard for the man who had financed their entire, comfortable existence. I clicked send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it the destruction of Valerie's career and Matthew's peace of mind. Within hours, possibly this very afternoon, their world would begin to unravel from a direction they had never anticipated. I closed the laptop and gathered the physical documents, feeding them into my small paper shredder. The evidence had served its purpose. Now it needed to disappear completely. Outside, the spring afternoon sun painted the kitchen in golden light. I made myself a sandwich and sat down to wait. Very soon, the fallout would begin. Matt had wanted to play games with his father's future. He would now find out that his father had been collecting insurance policies all along. The afternoon stretched before me like a blank canvas, waiting for careful brushstrokes. Matt's morning humiliation had been satisfying, but it was merely the opening move. Now came the methodical work that would truly demonstrate the difference between a helpless old man and a strategist with 40 years of business experience. In my small den, the afternoon sun illuminated 2 neat piles of documents on my desk. The pile on the left held photocopies of the Gomez and Associates expense reports I'd captured with my phone camera 2 months ago. The pile on the right held the authentic records Mike Ramirez had discreetly obtained through his professional network. The comparison told a story of systematic theft spanning 8 months. Valerie had been clever. I'd give her that. Instead of stealing large lump sums, she had inflated legitimate expenses by precise percentages. A genuine office supply order for $340 became $840 in her reports, exactly $500 more. Computer equipment costing $1,400 showed up as PUN 34 on the company's books. She had even created fictitious vendor relationships, submitting invoices for services never rendered. My calculator showed approximately $18,000 siphoned into her personal accounts, not enough to trigger automatic audits, but substantial enough to fund her designer handbags and weekend shopping trips that always puzzled me, given her modest salary. I opened my laptop and logged into the anonymous email account I'd established weeks ago. The message needed to sound concerned but professional, with enough specific detail to trigger an immediate investigation. Dear Mr. Gomez, I typed, I'm writing to alert you to serious financial discrepancies in your accounting department. Your employee, Valerie, has been systematically embezzling company funds through falsified expense reports. The attached evidence shows documented proof of inflated invoices, payments to fictitious vendors, and personal purchases disguised as business expenses. The pattern spans from January to August 2025, representing approximately $18,000 in theft. I recommend an immediate internal audit of all expense reports submitted by her, with close attention to office supplies, equipment maintenance, and consulting fees. Sincerely, a concerned observer. Methodically, I attached scanned copies of the most damning evidence, side-by-side comparisons of Valerie's reports against actual vendor receipts, photographs of suspicious documents from our kitchen table, and a detailed timeline showing the escalating pattern of theft. My finger hovered over the send button. Once this email hit Gomez and Associates, Valerie's career would unravel in a matter of hours. Her professional reputation would be destroyed. Criminal charges might follow. But then I remembered her voice through the thin walls. Maybe we should give him a deadline, 1 week to find a job or he's out. Her laughter as she discussed stealing my pension and warehousing me with strangers. I clicked send. The message vanished into cyberspace, carrying 28 attachments of irrefutable proof. By this evening, possibly within the next few hours, Valerie would be facing the consequences of both her theft and her cruelty. I closed the laptop and carefully fed the physical documents into my paper shredder, watching months of preparation transform into thin ribbons. The evidence had served its purpose. Now it needed to disappear completely. Phase 3 was complete. Matt had been shamed at work this morning. Valerie would be facing the destruction of her career this afternoon. Tonight, they would both come home to a father they assumed was helpless, never suspecting that he had orchestrated their simultaneous downfall. I brewed a cup of tea and settled into my chair to await the evening's revelations. The front door slammed shut at 6:43 p.m., followed by the sound of heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor. I looked up from my evening paper, feigning surprise at the urgency in Valerie's steps. She appeared in the living room doorway, her face stained with tears, mascara running beneath reddened eyes. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, blouse untucked, hair escaping its neat bun, hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "Valerie, what happened?" I put the paper down, half rising from my chair with practiced concern. "Why are you crying?" "I'm being fired." The words tumbled out between choked sobs. "Someone sent my boss documents. Financial records. They think I've been stealing. How terrible!" I moved toward her, my voice carefully calibrated to convey shock and sympathy. "Who could have done such a thing?" She collapsed into the armchair opposite me, her composure completely shattered. "I don't know. Someone anonymous sent detailed evidence to Mr. Gomez this afternoon. Bank records, expense reports, all laid out like some kind of forensic investigation." I sank back into my seat, maintaining my expression of baffled concern while internally cataloging every detail she revealed. That sounds absolutely devastating. What exactly are they claiming? "They're saying I inflated expense reports, created fake invoices, used the company credit card for personal purchases." Her voice broke completely. "Arthur, they have everything. Dates, amounts, even photographs of documents." Fascinating. Gomez had moved quickly, confronting her within hours of receiving my email. A competent businessman, clearly. The kind who understood that embezzlement required immediate action. "But surely this is some kind of misunderstanding," I said softly. "You're an honest person, Valerie. Anyone who knows you would vouch for your character." "That's the problem." She leaned forward desperately. "The evidence is so detailed, so specific. Whoever did this has been watching me for months, documenting everything. It's like they knew exactly what they were looking for." Indeed, they did. "Have you told Matthew yet?" I asked, allowing appropriate concern to creep into my voice. Her face crumpled further. "No, how can I? He's already stressed about work, about this situation with you skipping your first day." She looked at me with pleading eyes. "Arthur, what am I going to do? If I'm fired, if there are criminal charges, we'll lose everything." There, I said gently, moving to pat her on the shoulder in a fatherly gesture. "We'll figure this out together. Family supports family, right?" The irony was not lost on me. The woman who had laughed about sending me to a nursing home was now seeking comfort from the very person she had planned to abandon. "I've been suspended pending a full investigation," she continued, dabbing at her nose with a tissue. "Mr. Gomez said the evidence was too compelling to ignore. They're bringing in outside auditors, going through every transaction I've handled for the last year." Outside auditors. Mike Ramirez had certainly covered his tracks well when he helped me gather the initial evidence. The authentic expense reports he'd provided would corroborate my anonymous accusations perfectly. "Is there any chance this can be resolved quietly?" I asked, keeping my tone helpful. "Perhaps if you spoke to Mr. Gomez directly, explained your side of things?" "My side?" She laughed bitterly. "What side? The documents don't lie. Arthur, someone has built an ironclad case against me, and I have no idea who or why." The sound of Matt's car pulling into the driveway interrupted her despair. We both listened to his footsteps on the front porch, his key turning in the lock. "Please," Valerie whispered urgently, "let me tell him myself. He's going to be devastated." I nodded sympathetically, settling in to enjoy the final act of the evening as Matt's voice called out from the entryway. "Valerie? Dad? I'm home." Matt's heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, each thud carrying the weight of his difficult day. When he appeared in the living room doorway, his tie loosened and shirt rumpled, his expression immediately shifted from tired annoyance to sharp alarm at the scene before him. "What did you do to her, old man?" He dropped his briefcase and rushed to Valerie's side, who was still mopping at her tear-streaked face. "I come home and find my wife crying, and you're just sitting there like nothing's wrong." "Matthew, I didn't do anything," I began, keeping my tone calm despite his accusing glare. "Don't lie to me!" His voice rose to a dangerous pitch. "First, you embarrassed me at work by not showing up, and now you've somehow upset Valerie. What is wrong with you?" Valerie held up a weak hand, trying to interject. "Pie." "Matt, please, it's not your father." "Then what is it?" He spun to face her, his manager persona fully engaged, demanding answers with the same authority he likely used on his subordinates. "Why are you crying? What happened?" "They're firing me." The words burst from her lips like a dam breaking. "Someone sent anonymous evidence to Mr. Gomez, claiming I've been embezzling money. I've been suspended while they investigate." The color drained from Matt's face as if someone had pulled a plug. He froze, processing this information as his carefully constructed world continued to crumble around him. "Embezzling?" He sank into the nearest chair, his earlier anger replaced by stunned disbelief. "That's impossible. You're the most honest person I know." "That's what I tried to tell them," Valerie continued, her voice gaining strength from his support. "But whoever sent this information, they knew exactly what to look for. They had copies of expense reports, bank records, everything perfectly documented." I watched Matt's face cycle through a range of emotions, confusion, denial, and a rising panic as the implications hit him. His father skipping work, now his wife facing criminal charges. Everything was spinning out of his control. "This can't be happening," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "Not now, not when everything else is falling apart." "What do you mean, everything else?" Valerie asked, momentarily distracted from her own crisis. Matt shot me a look of undisguised resentment. "My father here decided to play games yesterday. He forgot to show up for work after I personally vouched for him with my boss. Made me look like a complete amateur." "I explained that was just a mix-up with the time," I started. "No more excuses." Matt shot to his feet, leveling an accusing finger at me. "Tomorrow, you are coming to work with me, and you are going to work. No tricks, no senior moments, no nonsense. I'm driving you there myself to make sure you show up." "Matthew, that's not necessary, and I don't want any tricks because I know you." His voice cracked with desperation and fury. "I've had enough of both of you causing problems. My reputation, my marriage, my entire life is under attack, and I'm not going to let it happen." Valerie stared between us with growing confusion, trying to process this family conflict while in the grips of her own catastrophe. "Don't you worry, son," I said quietly, meeting his burning gaze with surprising calm. "Tomorrow, everything will be different." Something in my tone made him hesitate. For just an instant, his aggressive posture faltered as he tried to interpret my words. "It better be," he said finally, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Because if it's not, if you embarrass me one more time, I will make good on every promise I made about nursing homes and taking your pension. Do you understand me?" "Ital," I nodded solemnly, hiding the small smile that threatened to appear. Tomorrow would indeed be different, more different than Matthew could possibly imagine. The house fell into a tense silence. 3 family members, each facing a separate crisis, none of them realizing that all of their problems stemmed from the same source. Morning came far too early for Matt, but I had slept soundly, knowing this would be the final act of my carefully orchestrated play. I dressed methodically in the work clothes he had bought me, each piece a costume for the performance of a lifetime. Matt was already in the kitchen when I appeared, drinking coffee with grim determination. His face bore the marks of a sleepless night, dark circles under his eyes, a stubble he'd forgotten to shave, the tense expression of a man who decided to solve his problems through sheer force of will. "Ready?" he asked curtly, bothering with no formalities. "Ready?" I replied, pulling on the jacket that completed my janitor's uniform. The drive to Vanguard Industries was spent in a tense silence for the first 10 minutes. The city's morning traffic gave Matt something to focus his nervous energy on, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching familiar neighborhoods pass by, counting down the minutes until everything changed. "Let me make something crystal clear," Matt finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Today, there will be no confusion about the time, no mysterious illnesses, no convenient memory lapses. You will show up, you will work, and you will make me look competent in front of my boss." "I understand completely," I said, keeping my tone appropriately subdued. "Do you?" He shot me a sideways glance. "Because that stunt you pulled yesterday nearly cost me my job. Larry was asking uncomfortable questions about my judgment, about why I was vouching for unreliable people. I had to talk him into giving you another chance." Poor Larry. He must have been completely baffled by the whole situation, trying to understand why his business partner's son was so keen on hiring his partner as unskilled labor. "And I don't want any tricks because I know you," Matt continued, warming to his theme. "I know you probably think this is all some game, that you can manipulate situations to get your way. But those days are over. From now on, I'm in charge." "Don't you worry, son," I said, allowing just a hint of mysterious confidence to color my words. "Today, everything will be different." He looked at me sharply, perhaps catching something in my tone that didn't match his expectations. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that I have a better understanding of the situation now," I replied carefully. "Sometimes it takes a while to see things clearly." Phew. The Vanguard Industries building loomed into view, a sleek, modern structure of glass and steel that represented 25 years of growth from Larry's garage startup. Matt had driven past this building thousands of times, never knowing his father had helped make it possible. "There it is," Matt said, his voice a mixture of pride and anxiety. 3,000 employees, a multi-million-dollar operation. This is where real men work, Dad. This is what success looks like. Indeed, it was. And today, Matt would learn just how much success his family had truly achieved. We pulled into the parking lot, Matt choosing a spot near the main entrance. As he killed the engine, I could see his hands were trembling slightly. Whether from anger, anxiety, or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. "Remember," he said, turning to face me with desperate intensity, "whatever happens in there, you follow my lead. I do the talking. You just stay quiet, respectful, and grateful for the opportunity." "Of course," I agreed, suppressing the irony of receiving such instructions upon entering my own company. Matt got out of the car and waited for me to join him on the sidewalk. Together, we walked toward the glass doors that would open onto the final scene of our family drama. In less than 5 minutes, Matthew would discover exactly who his father really was. The glass doors to Vanguard Industries hissed open, revealing the gleaming marble lobby I hadn't seen in months. Matt strode forward confidently, nodding to the security guard who waved us through without question. Another irony, as I had helped design those very security protocols years ago. "Stay close and keep quiet," Matt muttered as we entered the main hall. "I'll handle everything." The hallway was buzzing with morning activity. Employees with coffee cups, heading to meetings, discussing projects. I recognized several faces, though they didn't seem to notice the old man in a janitor's uniform walking behind an anxious mid-level manager. Matt had procured a mop and bucket from the supply closet, which he handed to me with barely disguised satisfaction. "Here, make it look authentic when Larry sees you." I accepted the cleaning implements without comment, internally amused by the theatrical nature of this final performance. All around us, the business of my company continued as usual. Reports being analyzed, decisions being made, profits being earned from investments I had helped finance decades ago. "There he is," Matt hissed, straightening his tie and adopting his most professional demeanor. Lawrence Larry Vargas was walking toward us from the opposite end of the hall, making his usual morning rounds of the facility. At 64, he moved with the confidence of a successful CEO, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression focused on the tablet in his hand. "Mr. Vargas," Matt called out, his voice pitched with just the right amount of respectful enthusiasm. "Right on time, sir." Larry looked up, initially distracted, then focused on Matt with polite attention. His gaze flicked briefly to me, a routine glance at the elderly janitor accompanying his employee. Then, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Matthew," Larry said slowly, his voice laced with confusion. "You brought him in?" "Yes, sir," Matt's chest puffed with pride. "I solved our staffing issue and my family situation all at once. Here's my father, the janitor." The words hung in the air like a dare to the universe itself. Around us, other employees continued their conversations, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their corporate hallway. Larry's face transformed through a spectrum of emotions, recognition, disbelief, and finally, a cold fury that seemed to drop the temperature in the hall by 10 degrees. "Matthew," Larry said, his voice deathly quiet, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Sir?" Matt's confidence began to falter as he registered Larry's expression. "You brought Arthur, one of the largest shareholders in this company, into my building holding a mop, and you're standing there, proud of yourself?" The color drained from Matt's face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed without a sound, like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible," he whispered. 25 years ago, your father invested $500,000 into my startup," Larry continued, his voice rising. "Without him, there is no Vanguard Industries. Without him, there is no job for you to lose, which you just did." I don't understand." "You're fired, immediately." Larry's words cut through the hall like a razor, causing nearby employees to stop and stare. "Clear out your desk and get off the premises. Security will escort you out." Matt stood frozen, his world collapsing around him with the speed and finality of a controlled demolition. His briefcase slipped from his numb fingers, hitting the marble floor with a loud crack that echoed in the suddenly silent hallway. Larry turned to me, his expression all genuine concern, the anger completely gone from his voice. "Arthur, my friend, what on earth is going on here?" I dropped the mop and stood to my full height, shedding the submissive posture I had held for so long. When I spoke, my voice carried the authority and intelligence I had kept hidden for days. "Larry, I think we need to have a private conversation in your office." Larry's executive office had always been a sanctuary of success. Rich mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, walls adorned with awards and photographs documenting 25 years of corporate triumph. As I entered, I noted several photos that showed Larry and me together at various company sites, evidence of a partnership Matt never knew existed. Matt followed us in like a sleepwalker, his face still ghost-white from the hallway revelation. He slumped into a leather chair without being invited, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Arthur, please sit," Larry said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk, the same chair where I had sat countless times discussing business strategy and company direction. "Can someone please explain to me why my business partner was just introduced as a janitor by his own son?" I settled into the familiar seat, feeling the weight of the deception finally lift from my shoulders. "Larry, my family has been under the impression that I am financially dependent on them. They have been uncharitable in their assessment of my worth." "Uncharitable?" Larry's voice sharpened. "Matthew, your father owns 37% of this company. He's been quietly collecting dividends for decades, not because he needs the money, but because that's how investments work. What exactly did you think he did for a living?" Matthew's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Factory work, manual labor. I thought he was poor." "Poor?" Larry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your father could buy and sell most of the city's business district. He chose to live modestly. He chose to let you believe he was struggling, and apparently, He chose to let you treat him like a burden. The truth hung in the air between us. 25 years of hidden success finally brought into the light. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city skyline, a view I had helped Larry afford through my initial investment. During the first week of my retirement, my son told me, "We don't need another mouth to feed in this house," and he found me a job as a janitor. I smiled and accepted, hiding my cold anger behind a mask of resignation. But when I didn't show up for work, he realized something, namely that he had underestimated me, and that now his life would never be the same. Recap segment from the original text, localized. I've got wonderful news. Today was my last day of work. Finally retired. The fork slipped from Matthew's hand, clattering against his plate. Valerie's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. I beamed at them both, expecting congratulations, maybe even a toast with the cheap wine we kept for special occasions. Instead, silence stretched over our small kitchen table like a canyon. Matt recovered first, his face flushing. "What? Dad, you can't just quit your job like that. Did you even think about what this means?" "Of course I did," I said, my smile faltering. 40 years of service, son. I've earned it. I thought we could celebrate." "Celebrate?" Valerie's voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife. She set her water glass down with deliberate force. "Matthew, does your father think we're just going to feed him for free?" The warmth in my chest began to freeze. This wasn't how I'd pictured this moment on the drive home. I'd imagined smiles. Maybe Matt clapping me on the back, telling me how proud he was of his old man. Instead, my son's face twisted into something I'd never seen directed at me. Pure annoyance. "Listen, Dad," Matt leaned forward, his manager's tone replacing any trace of family affection. "I'm not supporting an extra mouth. You need a job. Tomorrow. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or stocking shelves, but you're not going to sit here living off my paycheck." Each word hit me like a physical blow. I looked at this man I had raised, whose college education I had financed, whose wedding I had helped pay for. The overhead light cast harsh shadows on his features, making him look like a stranger. Valerie nodded in approval. "Arthur, you're 65, not 90. Plenty of people your age work. My neighbor's father bags groceries, and he's 73. "But I thought," I began. "You thought wrong?" Matt interrupted. "You think money grows on trees? Do you have any idea what it costs to run this house? To keep you fed and clothed? I work 50 hours a week at Vanguard Industries just to keep us afloat." The irony was lost on him, though neither of them would understand it. Not yet. My untouched dinner grew cold as I absorbed their words. The casserole Valerie had made, my favorite, now looked unappetizing under the fluorescent light. Everything about this moment felt wrong, distorted, like seeing my life in a funhouse mirror. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "I should have discussed it with you first." Matt's expression softened slightly, perhaps hearing the defeat in my tone. "Look, Dad, I'm not trying to be cruel, but reality is reality. We can't afford a freeloader." That word buzzed in my head as I nodded.